pros and cons. First, the pro. We were in the midst of an oil build-out even before this happened. So we were probably going to be seeing another 1 million barrels a day within the calendar year. That will probably increase by about half now. And considering the environment we're in, that's great. However, it's nowhere near enough. So if everyone who can be brought in is brought in, we're still talking about a shortage in excess of 3 million barrels a day this year, and then next year probably going up to 5. It's very difficult for me to see a scenario where that's going on, where oil prices stay below 170. And considering that the Biden administration is not incredibly popular, and it's a midterm election year in the United States, I think it's very highly likely that the United States is going to ban oil exports, or at least restrict them, in order to sever the American energy price environment from the global one. Now, that'll keep prices relatively low and mild in the United States, but that's going to remove another 3 million barrels a day of consumption capacity, production capacity from the rest of the world. So the rest of the world is going to have to get by without American and Russian oil at the same time, and that's going to rewire everything. Okay, I think you're going to like this one. Okay, so if the Americans are going to remove themselves from the global energy market, the Europeans are the ones that in the short term are facing the biggest problem, because all that Russian crude that was going west is crude that they used to use. So the Europeans are going to have a very simple choice. I mean, they can petition the United States for a little bit of help, and the U.S. will send refined product to try to take the edge off of it, but it won't be nearly enough. The Europeans are going to need an alternate energy source, so they will go south. They will start interfacing with their former colonies throughout the African continent and making sure that those flows go north to Europe instead of east to Asia. The next country in the kick line is India. If there's minimal Russian crude and minimal African crude and minimal North American crude, all of a sudden India is looking at a global shortage that is greater than total Indian production. But India is the closest major country to the Persian Gulf. And any tankers that leave the Persian Gulf have to sail by India to get to East Asia. In that environment, India is the only country in the world with the military, economic, and political capacity to interface with the Persian Gulf from a point of strength. So I think it's going to be very easy and very necessary for India to go to Kuwait and the Emiratis and the Saudis and arrange a direct transfer deal. So prices will probably be uncomfortably high. That's going to be unavoidable, but you're not going to have a problem with actual supply. That's going to be for countries further east. Because if you remove all this oil from the market, then the entirety of the shortage falls to the last country in line, and that's China. We may be in China's last year as a manufacturing power already. Because if they can't keep the lights on, nothing else matters.
So that's quite a dire situation that you're talking of from the point of view of China. One last question, just to wrap up, and this is something that, let's hope he has positive things to say, and whatever he says negative doesn't come true, but that's not been the record this man has had. So you're talking about a damaged Russian crude infrastructure, disruption in Ukraine and Russia, wheat and agriculture supplies, dysfunctional Kazakh sources also, you said it goes through Russia, oil at abnormally high levels, and this plus post-QE inflation hitting hard, China shutting down cities now for the COVID waves. This is the present to the next few months. Add to that the not so rosy situation that it's not going to be May 9th, it's going to be a long time after that the Russian push will continue, and it probably will come to a place where by June or so, or July probably, the Russian pipes start cracking, bursting, and then they are in a absolute desperate situation. On top of that, I'll go back to your last time's prediction that the baby boomer generation retires this year in the United States at the average age of 70, and by 2022 end, you said most people will be in conserving mode, out of spending out of pension than out of earnings. So we're basically going to face a serious situation here sometime in the middle of 2022 onwards. And if the least that could be done was to get the oil thing back to current situation, that itself, you said, technically will take between a year to two. So you're going to be seeing a very, very bleak situation over the next 2 to 3 years. Your prognosis for the global economy now for the next 12 to 24 months?
The global economy is going to be in recession, maybe even depression. We are at a break point where globalization is collapsing and the demographics of so many countries are turning. We've always known, demographically speaking, that this was going to be the decade where the old economic model of globalization was going to fail. We've always known it's coming. The COVID epidemic sped things up, and Ukraine has put in a hard stop. So we're there. This is the year it's all breaking down. Something to keep in mind. When the Americans created globalization, it was done as a bribe. We were trying to convince countries to join us against the Soviets. So you can participate in any supply chain, participate in manufacturing, access any market, access our market, if in exchange you ally with us against the Soviets. India didn't join. India has been relatively pro-Soviet. In fact, the Indians were pro-Soviet even when the Soviets were gone. What that means is when globalization collapses, India doesn't have to fall all that far because India never invested its economy into the international network. And since you have functional boycotts, not boycotts, not the word, since you have functional control, if you want it, over who gets Persian Gulf energy, India is going to suffer, yes, unavoidable. You may not have invested your entire economy in it, but there's no way that you can break the imports and the export system of the world without feeling something. That goes for the US too. But India is going to hold the control to the gates of the Persian Gulf. And to think that India won't take advantage of that and get some benefits from that, I think is being very, very creative. So we're all going to have to learn to think a little bit